Thanks for coming back. Here it is, part 2.
But the beauty part about that is
I had no idea about any of that. That's
but
fascinating.
I had no idea
because you couldn't get anything.
In real time, I'm like, oh wow, I didn't know that. I stumbled upon something interesting. So yeah, so
I gotta believe he's in the book.
Yeah, in fact I think so. Who else? You know who everyone loves is Jan Brandt. Was an AOL executive. She's the one responsible for all of those AOL discs.
The discs.
Yeah. So she was
they were in cereal boxes and shit.
They put them in Omaha steaks, and she said that they had to test to make sure that freeze drying the discs wouldn't ruin them. But so you would have gotten a frozen Omaha steak with an AOL disc at one point.
I swear to God, Brian, I can't remember the airline. But I would swear on a stack of Bibles that there was a time where you walked onto an airplane and you got AOL discs.
They put them on the seats in sports stadiums. Their biggest success was, I remember this because when I was in high school, I worked at Blockbuster Video. Another thing that the internet has killed over the last 20 years is video stores. And that was a huge promotion. And she said that was one of her biggest that was one of their biggest insights, is that when you're checking out at the counter in the video store, you're going home, you're picking up some popcorn and some candy, and let's just hand you this disc. And that was when they realized, that was the inflection point when they're like, we should just be giving this away, because what they were doing all sorts of intensive user studies and things like that. And this is so early on that when they sit people down in front of computers, people grab the computer mouse and put it down on the floor like it's a sewing machine pump or something, like they don't know how to use the computer mouse. So she realized that their problem in getting people to try AOL, to try an online service, is to just try it. Don't bother educating them. We don't need a fancy ad campaign that this is how you use this is what you get. No, give them a fucking disc, hopefully get it in their house, and have them, you know what I did just get that new computer for Christmas 1994. Maybe this is something interesting I can do with it. Just put it in the drive. So that's why they, at one point, something like 90% of the CDs in the world had an AOL logo.
And, I remember watching this very well. And I'm not exact, I guess because more technical people, and it was kind of cooler, I guess, to be on CompuServe. So I was on CompuServe.
It was nerdier. It was more, if you were into tech, that you were a legit person. AOL people were always thought of as like the newbies, like the unwashed masses, like the training wheels for the internet, that sort of thing. So
it was definitely not the cool kids wearing those clothes. No way. And I can remember sitting in my kind of, extra bedroom that I used as an office. And the first time logging on to CompuServe and fucking around, and then sort of over the next 24 hours, what was just soaking in my head, and of course I went back to it and played with it, but the thing that was soaking in my head is, wow, what is the world gonna be like when there's no distinction between my computer and this I can't even remember what we called it back then, this network. Right? And it was like this, it was this profound moment of understanding that the future was going to be different from anything I had ever thought about, because there was going to be no distinction, no difference between what was on my computer and what was available on this world. And that was a mind-blowing thought to me back then.
I'll give you, so again, this is why I wanted to do the book as a straight history, because I'll give you an important, you might not remember this, CompuServe, at least until very, very late, you couldn't choose your own screen name. CompuServe gave you, I think.
I remember my first CompuServe handle was 473, blah blah blah.
Just
numbers. And I remember when CompuServe got cool, as the web started to come about, I just ported my CompuServe ID to the web, and so my first email address, my first web email address, as opposed to CompuServe, was that number at CompuServe.com.
So think of the chronology of this then. CompuServe gives you a string of numbers. AOL allows you to choose your screen name. One of the reasons AOL wins out over CompuServe is because AOL, derided for being the training wheels for the internet era, in a way very much did train people to what you're talking about. I'm going to start to live my life online. My identity is going to be online. So I'm going to choose, a lot of us chose really dumb AOL screen names early on. But so what I'm saying
Donkey
is
Johnson and stuff.
Exactly. But so this is why it's valuable to do the history as a straight chronology. So AOL wins because it helps people learn. It trains people how to live their life in cyberspace, to live their life virtually. The next iteration of that is things like social media or blogging, where it's like, not only, okay, do I have an online identity, but my social life is going to happen online, so that then when things like blogging comes about and people start to share their personal lives and their personal details and their photos, then why does Facebook beat MySpace? Because the insight that Zuckerberg had was that if you are your authentic self, if we can port your actual authentic social graph, the friends you know and trust, into our system, onto the online, that is more of a valuable thing. MySpace people don't remember this. You could follow anybody. Why do you think Tila Tequila had however many millions of followers or whatever? And so if you go through the chronology, AOL beats CompuServe because it's making it more personal. It's bringing you online. Facebook beats MySpace because, again, it's learning the lesson of your authentic personal self. So there's all these threads that if you follow the A leads to B leads to C, these lessons you can learn that can explain how we got here,
That's a great thread. That's a really great thread, Brian. And that, of course, that's exactly what happened. Mm-hmm. Any other threads like that you want to tease out a little?
Two. Whatever the new platform is, like you asked earlier, and I said it's probably AR, VR, whatever the new platform is, the first $1 billion that someone will make will always be allowing people to talk to each other. Again, why did AOL win? Prodigy didn't want people to interact. AOL had these message rooms where you could go in there and talk dirty to each other. Like, just letting people talk to each other. Why is WhatsApp, why did Facebook buy it for $17 billion, whatever? It's because just letting people talk to each other. It turns out that computers are the greatest tools that humanity has ever devised for just talking to each other, right? So so again, when things like WhatsApp and Snapchat and things like that, why have they been successful? Because the new platform was mobile, and so the most successful companies on mobile, or the first most successful ones, were the ones that allowed us to talk to each other. So I guarantee you, the $1 billion or $10 billion company, if AR and VR are the next platform, the first ones will be the ones that will allow us to talk to each other. So that's a thread that's gone all the way through.
And that is also, I think, an equally fascinating insight. And you know what it makes me think of? And this may sound like a crazy dot to connect. So if you think about human beings and you think about what is the worst torture human beings are subject to?
Well, you want me to make a joke like Barry Manilow or something?
It's isolation.
Yeah, right. Well, they say that solitary confinement is actually torture.
Right. And so, and there's a lot of people who say it's inhumane and we shouldn't do it in prisons in supposedly, or as we say today, supposedly, evolved societies. But my only point is that insight is so powerful. And part of, I think, what makes it powerful is when you realize that the worst thing we can do to somebody is take them away from being able to interact with people. And so if that's the worst thing, then the best thing, the most rewarding thing we get to do as human beings is to interact with each other. That would make total sense.
And the converse of that is that the most powerful thing is to facilitate that. I hate to keep quoting from a book that's not going to come out for a whole nother year or whatever, but one of the things that I say about Facebook is that Mark Zuckerberg's great insight, his $1 billion idea, was that we're social monkeys. And what do social monkeys like to do? They like to look at the other monkeys. What are the other monkeys up to? Let me show those other monkeys
Did
what
he
I've
ever
done.
call us social monkeys, or is that
No,
your word?
that's mine.
Because I
But
have a feeling if he had said that, there might be some backlash.
yeah. But anyway, but
Yeah.
the point holds is that, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs or whatever, like up there is the social aspect, is the being a part of a community, being a part of, so yes, so that's the $1 billion idea of Facebook, is essentially capturing what is one of the most powerful drives uh, of our species, which is interacting with our species. Like you said, like being cut off is the worst thing that you can imagine. And so then the argument would be that, if you're part of this current zeitgeist that technology is going too far, you would say, well, but they not only captured it, but they put it on steroids. And now I can't help but check Facebook every 5 minutes, and it doesn't make me feel good when I see on Instagram, oh, look at her and the amazing life that she's leading, and why is my life not that good? And there's a whole movement. You mentioned TED. I'm a TED resident. There's a great TED talk. Shoot, I always forget the guy's name. But like, there's this whole movement about ethical design, about how all of the things like Facebook and like, it's all been about like what they call increasing user engagement. Another word for that is addictiveness, right? And so there have been psychological studies, like when you use your phone and you swipe, what's new, what's new, what's new, what's new. Well, what does that resemble? It resembles pulling a slot machine.
It's a
Yes.
dopamine delivery system,
It's
right?
a slot machine, right? And it's dopamine. And so there is sort of this movement like, okay, social media has captured one of the most powerful impulses of the human animal, but then it's taken it to the extreme, and so maybe is that one of the reasons why there is a backlash against technology. Listen, all it could be is that all of this technology is just coming at us too fast, and we haven't had enough time to sort it out and put it in the proper place of our lives and things.
Well, think about where the world was 100 years ago, or even 200 years ago, right? I mean, and when you think about 100 years ago in the context of how long even human beings have been around, like no shit failure to adapt it too much, right? Our neurology is freaking the fuck out. I mean, because we're overstimulated. I mean, our fight or flight is getting fired by this stuff all the time, and sooner or later that shit'll make you crazy, right? And we just haven't adapted. It's the same reason our bodies haven't adapted to the fact that there's food 5 seconds from us at all times, right?
Well, so see, this is why I find this topic fascinating. Not only is it the industry that I have made my living in, but and not only do I legitimately find the entrepreneurial stories of people creating great companies around these ideas interesting, but to me, this is examining, the analogy would be, I took a history of rock and roll class in college, and so it's like examining, yeah, man, rock and roll really changed our culture, and how that transformed the way we think of ourselves, and politics and fashion and everything like that. But technology is transforming our lives in fundamental ways. You and I are talking about like almost psychological, evolutionary, biological changes that we're having to deal with. And so I couldn't believe that no one had written a book about this before. To me, this should be more examined. We're looking at this every day.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, and that's why I'm so excited to meet you, and because I just love what you're doing, and I think it's as I've become a podcaster, and I sort of had this own little aha that these are little time capsules, but of course that's not. That's your intention, is to try to capture it, and what better time to write about history than while it's occurring or shortly thereafter. Because if somebody tries to write this book 200 years ago, there's a lot of shit they're going to get the wrong that you're going to get right, because of the proximity, of course. And so it's a very fucking cool idea. And so I another question I've been dying to ask you, you're an entrepreneur. You've now studied the history of the internet. You shared those two threads, which are very fucking cool. From the perspective of an entrepreneur, what should entrepreneurs know? If I'm an entrepreneur, what should I know about the history of the internet that's going to make a difference in my ability to build a successful, what we would call category king company that dominates a category in space?
I would feel like if I think back on, again, the dominant ones, like what do we think is dominant today? FANG, Facebook, Google, Amazon, and what's the G? Oh, no. The N is Netflix.
Netflix,
Facebook,
yeah, FANG, yeah.
Netflix and Google. All four of those cases, at various points in their development, they were going after things that people thought were not important categories. Okay. When Google gets started, there's a universe of search engines. Lycos, Excite, Yahoo, So when Google gets started,
I can remember talking to Ron Conway about Google very early on, and I am enough of a man to admit to you, Brian, I remember thinking, what the fuck, Ron, are you doing? Like, there's a billion. We didn't call them search engines; they were called portals, right? But and there was Alta Vista and like a whole bunch of ones that nobody would ever remember, and Lycos and all this shit. And I was like, he's like, no, this is one of our big themes. We think there's a lot of untapped, market potential in search, and there's great new technology. And I just thought, kind of, that's a category that's done, man. Yahoo's the king, and you got all these other guys, and fucking A, was I wrong?
Search engine. Yeah, well, okay. Let me go down the list real quick, because for every one of them I can give you. Amazon in the late 90s and the dot-com bubble, especially after the bubble burst, what was a bigger cliche than an e-commerce company? Because they all lost money. So, the promise of e-commerce was, it's more efficient commerce, and but not a single one of them has made a dime. And,
and the whole joke about, what are you guys going to do? Make it up on volume, right, all that shit, right?
Now, Amazon's an interesting case because they actively try not to make profits sometimes. But so Google, we didn't need another search engine. Amazon, e-commerce, the biggest joke in the world. Netflix, what was a bigger joke than trying to go against the TV studios and the Hollywood studios? Oh, you're going to deliver that over the web? I'm going to watch TV. The amount of times that I've, researched articles, and people like Bill Gates, God bless him, has literally, I could give you 10 or 12 quotes where he's like, well, you're never going to want to watch TV. You're going to want to watch that on your big screen. That's why he spent so many years trying to own the living room with web TV and things like that. So, okay, Netflix.
And the other one about that, per your conversation was, I think her name was Christina on the SoundCloud discussion. Yeah. That one was so obvious, but I think I found the part of your discussion when you were talking about how interesting it was that SoundCloud and Spotify are European companies. And that the whole situation around Napster created a context that nobody was going to do anything in music in the U.S.
Yeah.
To the Netflix point, I think that also bled over into video entertainment. I think there was a lot of people who just, you looked at that and when did BitTorrent get started?
It was after Napster got shut down. I think it was 2004, because there was an intermediate. So Napster gets shut down 2002, but there was like Morpheus and Kazaa and all those, right? And then it was, so like BitTorrent was like the third generation. Netscape is the first. There's all these other second generation, and then BitTorrent. Yeah.
And so I just think there was a feeling in Silicon Valley that just said this whole space is a disaster. The bandwidth isn't there. The media companies are going to smash us in the balls and
Hey, listen, do you remember when Google bought YouTube and everyone's like, are you insane? You've just bought lawsuits up the wazoo. It turned out that Google was the perfect acquirer because their mastery of algorithms allowed them to do the thing that killed Napster. Like, Napster could have survived if they had been able to create algorithms that would allow them to take down copyrighted stuff. Well, who knows algorithms better than Google, right? And then the other thing is that by the time Google buys Yahoo, Google buys YouTube, They had the AdSense engine up and running.
They had it nailed, yeah.
And so they can when Napster is fighting with Hollywood and the record companies, they don't have anything to give them. There's no deal they can make. Google has a deal. It's called money. They say, you know what? Listen, if you let us keep some of your stuff up there, we'll share the money. You see those little ads along the side? So, right. So Netflix couldn't. Let me finish my point. The point you asked the question: if you're an entrepreneur starting today, what's the key? Don't ever believe that a category is too dumb to disrupt, or too done. Either too dumb, D-U-M-B, or too D-O-N-E to disrupt. Because in all of those cases, and then Facebook, I could give you another example of, like, you know, obviously there was already MySpace and Friendster before it, so why did you need another one? All of those four, the biggest tech companies that we know of today, were at various points called absolutely insane, and for good reason, right? So the answer is that if you really do think you have the best solution for your niche, even if the niche itself seems to be dumb, just execute on that, right? Just execute on your if you can execute on your category the best, better than anybody else, then don't worry about it, because being the best I'd rather be the best in a small category than be mediocre in a category where there's 1,000 competitors, right? So then eventually...
It's so funny you're saying this, because we just had Cameron Harold on, and he was the guy that scaled 800 Junk. He was the COO of 1-800-GOT-JUNK.
Yeah, yeah.
And before that, he, I'm forgetting the company. It was a painting company where he did a very similar thing. And so he, you know, his big wins were a fucking painting company and a garbage hauling company.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And he had a very similar, I forget, Brian, how he said it, but he had a very similar sort of vein, which is, you know, business doesn't have to be complicated. And sometimes there are brand new categories, or categories that can be fundamentally reimagined, and therefore redesigned, sitting right in front of you.
Even if it's a dumb, D-U-M-B or D-O-N-E category, again, by the very nature of doing it better than anybody else, you can transform the category. Again, if we had been pitched, hey, I've got a trash hauling service. Really? That's the dumbest category I've ever thought of. But by doing it better than it had ever been done before, it transformed the category. It made it something different.
Well, yes, I agree with you. And I'm going to push on your choice of words, because I think it's important.
Okay.
If you'll allow me.
Sure.
I would argue they actually did it different. So if you take Netflix, Blockbuster as a simple example, as a former Blockbuster employee.
Yeah.
Reed Hastings did not attack head on.
Right.
He said, hey, you used to do this. I think you should do this.
Yeah.
In our book, Play Bigger, we call those Frodos, from twos. So category designers teach the world how to move from the way it is to the way they want it to be by reimagining a problem. And when the world agrees with them about the problem, they suck the solution out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so I would argue that these folks are natural category designers, and what they do is they take their breakthrough innovation product, but they consciously teach the world how to think about it. So they don't market the product in a classical sense, like essentially from a feature perspective. They market the problem called, what's really the best way to get videos?
Right.
Wouldn't it be great to go to a website, type in every movie you'd like to see, and have them magically show up in your mailbox? And you're like, just by asking the question, what is the best way to get videos? You know, that creates, Reed's a billionaire, right?
Right. Well, actually, since we're talking about that, I'll plug a recent episode where I had Neil Hunt on, just retired from Netflix. He's basically the guy that made streaming happen as a product. And so...
How long ago did that one come out?
Maybe last month. It's maybe 3 or 4 episodes ago. It's
Oh shit!
or
I for some reason I missed it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay,
It's maybe 6, 7 episodes. It's Neil Hunt on Netflix and the story of Netflix streaming. Yeah, he just retired like a month ago, and so it was great because he almost was like treating it as like his exit interview, like like
his victory lap.
exactly. It was so great, which and I appreciate it because I feel like again as something that's so transformative, streaming. Like I felt like that's an underreported story. We don't know the history of how that happened
And
inside.
look at how important it is, right? Holy shit!
Yeah. But so he mentions in that episode, and Reed has been quoted multiple times saying this thing. We didn't name the company DVDsbymail.com. We named it Netflix because we knew that the best way to deliver content would be over the internet someday. Now, when we started, we couldn't do it, but we got there. So.
And here's how I know that's not bullshit. So one of the VC backers of Netflix is a firm called Foundation Capital.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember it would certainly be 99, 2000, maybe 2001, but I don't think the bubble had burst yet. So it was certainly in that time zone. And Foundation was having a schmooze and booze or whatever somewhere. And that was the first time I met him. And I knew of him because, if I'm not mistaken, was he the founder of Pure or was he the founder of Atria?
Yeah.
I think he was the founder of Pure, right?
You know what? I know this because I've researched it, but yes, right. He sold a company. Can't remember which one it was, but yes.
The combined company was called Pure Atria, and I can't remember which one he founded. Anyway, exactly. And it was in a pretty nose-picking space. I could explain it, but who gives a shit? It was an enterprise technology space, but it was a space I understood well. And I can remember sort of saying to him at this cocktail party, like, hey, so you go from like this enterprise space to this consumer space. And I remember that part of the conversation. And I remember specifically, Brian, him saying to me that we're not stupid. We know sooner or later this gets delivered over the internet. But, with dial-up where it is and broadband penetration where it is, we don't think we can get there from here. And so the whole idea for the company hinged on this ability to get the CDs in the mail and the whole story, right? But I can remember him talking about that early. And so that was not bullshit at all. And he wouldn't, by the way, he wouldn't know me from a hole in the wall. So I'm not bragging that we're good friends. That was I think the one and only time we met. So I remember him. He won't remember me.
I just looked it up in my notes. It's Pure Atria. So, but, there's a term that I like, this isn't always true in the internet era, but it's been more true in the internet era than in other eras, which is sometimes there are ideas that for businesses that are just seeing where the tidal wave of history is going to land and just plotting yourself right on the beach and waiting for the tidal wave to wash over you, right? So that's a perfect example of it, is that, okay, they saw that eventually that digital delivery it's self-evident. Like you say to a 14-year-old, like, yeah, wait till it airs at 8:00. No. What I want to watch it now.
Right? They're like, and I feel that way too now. Like, what do you mean I have to wait till some fuck show comes out?
Right. So just because they launched with DVD by mail, that was a placeholder till the tidal wave came in, right? The tidal wave of history that they knew was going to come. And it is, interesting. We were talking about Napster. Everyone thinks that Napster is a story of, piracy and free music and lawsuits and things like that. But you know what Napster was actually the harbinger of is this current world of unlimited selection, instant gratification. Before Napster, you had no real ability to go to a place and find all of the music in the world, right? Napster was the first, at least in media, where you could, like, I want to hear a John Coltrane song. I want to hear a specific Bob Dylan outtake from the Basement Tapes. You could find it on Napster instantaneously. If I say to you today, there's this great show, you should watch it, you don't expect that you would have to go to a store and buy it. You wouldn't have to. you expect that you should be able to dial it up on your phone and start watching it in 30 seconds.
Absolutely.
Unlimited selection, instant gratification. That would be my third big lesson of the internet. And Napster was the first thing that proved that is the revolution that the internet has wrought, is that we as consumers demand and expect unlimited selection, instant gratification.
I love it. I love it, Brian. Is there anything else before we kick out of this one?
No, I even though we've been talking about how the book is just done or whatever, I want to emphasize that the podcast is going to go on ad infinitum, because there's still more people I want to talk to. There will always be more companies being founded and things like that.
One area you haven't focused on in the history that I think is important.
Okay, hit me.
Is the role of, what I think in hindsight you could call as the first web consultants and web development firms.
So that's an interesting thing. Explain to me what you're talking about, and then I'll tell you why I haven't done it yet.
So I would, in the spirit of full disclosure, I was the founding chief marketing officer at Scient.
Right.
And so there was this wave in the mid 90s. US Web, to my best memory, was probably first, where they tried to do essentially a roll up or a franchise. I can't remember, of like small web shops, but
right.
But the next real wave was, Scient, Sapient, IXL, Razorfish.
Right. The first business model of the web was essentially getting people on the web. I'll create a website for you. I'll create, Right, exactly. So you're talking about that roll up. Yeah.
And, back in the Scient days, to put this into context, if you were a startup and you wanted to build what at the time we called a .com, and you were a commerce consumer facing .com, you were going to pay us $5 million to do that. There was no fucking Shopify, right?
Yeah, right.
And then if you were Chase Manhattan Bank, or a Fortune 500 company, I mean, we had Fortune 500 companies back then, Brian, us no bullshit, who were paying us $3 million a month to build their quote unquote .com businesses.
Do you know Craig Canerick of Razorfish?
I don't.
Yeah, he was on the show early on, and I think his line was something like, we didn't know what to quote them. So I'm talking about like early 94, 95 when they start Razorfish, and they get these blue chip Fortune 500 companies saying, build us a website. And they would just think to themselves, and they'd pull a number out of the air, $2 million. And then the companies would be like, fine. And they were like, okay, I don't know if it'll cost that to make a website for you, but okay. So again, from what we talked about at the beginning, making it up as they went along, because they didn't know any better.
Well, I think there's a lot of fun stories and learnings, because, we were the people essentially putting the corporate world, and in many cases startups, onto the interweb, in their first real shot at doing business on the web, right?
Right.
But here's another thing that Bezos doesn't get credit for, I don't think. The reason Fortune 500 banks, the reason big time retailers, the reason financial services company, you pick your industry vertical. At that time, we're begging Scient to be clients, and I'm sure Razorfish and we were all on fire. Scient was a company that hired 2,400 people in less than 3 years and had a $9 billion market cap in about 3 years. I mean, it was that kind of a situation. But to get back to Amazon and Bezos, the phrase at the time, Brian, was, you don't want to wait to get Amazoned.
Right. Whatever industry you're in, it can be Amazon. Right.
That's right. And so one company in every industry created essentially massive demand for, and not just Scient and IXL and Razorfish and all of us, but Amazon sold a lot of fucking Sun servers and Oracle databases.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry I keep saying things that are going to be in this book that theoretically you're going to see a year from now. But I do say that
who gives a shit? I bet it's going to be a great book.
So much of the .com bubble was that. was basically just corporate America trying to make sure that they weren't someone wasn't gonna come along and eat their lunch. There's another thing that like people forget, like before the dot-com era, it was rare that a 24-year-old or even a 30-year-old would rise up overnight in the ranks of a Fortune 500 company. But when the web comes along and the only people that get it are the kids, then all of a sudden, like the fact that we're used to, oh, you're a 24-year-old CEO of a company that's valued at $1 billion. That happens all the time now. Well, not all the time, but
that was not the norm. That was really the first time, right?
No, and it was
the guys
mainly
who ran client server hardware companies and software companies were not, 30, and I can remember it was so weird. Because I got thrown out of school. I started my first company at 18. So I got a head start. And so I was the head of marketing of a software company at 27, 28 years old. And so, by this time at Cyan, I'm only, I think 30. No, I was 28 when we started, 29 maybe. Anyway, whatever I was, in that range. But here was the weird thing. I would roll in with a bunch of quote unquote kids behind me to go do a briefing at, you pick your place in Manhattan or for that matter, San Francisco. And they would roll out the red carpet like Moses just came in with the tablets, because we knew, to your point, and, we got called all kinds of crazy laudatory things that we didn't probably deserve. But I think that's, that's a part of the story that I don't know that, is told very much. A, those companies, and B, a lot of what drove it was Amazon. And C, here's the third part. And I would love for you to shine your light on this. There was another thing going on in corporate America at that time that drove the purchase of a lot of Sun servers and a lot of Scient services, which was major corporate. What's that?
Y2K.
Well, no, there was that,
right, yeah.
which was a big part of it. But I don't know that the internet had much to do with that. But this was more, big companies looked at it and went, these startups who were purporting to, quote unquote, disrupt my industry are growing fast, doing well. Nobody's holding them account to profitability because they're in a land grab. And some of these fuckers are going public and they're worth billions of dollars. So many corporations created whatever sort of proxy structure for a venture capital. This is when the term intrapreneuring first started. And so a lot of these big companies tried to make similar moves, tried to have these things that felt like a venture-backed company that could ultimately go public.
Well, Disney is maybe the most famous example of that with their, Go network, but everybody had that. Like, right. And the other
but
reason
it happened at scale this time around this new technology, right?
Yeah.
And it was a fascinating thing to be part of.
Well, you know what, I'll because you're saying, first of all, I'll take your note that this is an avenue I got to go down. But I'll recommend Mike Slade, who was at Starwave, is a good episode. Starwave being the people that got ESPN online, and then I think got bought by Disney, if I remember my research correctly. But so like one of those companies that made a lot of money by getting people online and things like that.
The other one you may want to think about, one of the co-authors of Play Bigger, Al Ramadan, was the founder of Quokka Sports. Does that ring a bell?
Oh yeah. Ooh, see, you know what? You might have just given me an episode, right? Like,
well, so get this. So Quokka is the first company. No shit. And I know I'm biased, but this is this is in the parlance of our times, Brian, legit shit right here. Mm-hmm. The first company to really bring sports to the internet like that, right? They're trying to create a unique digital experience that sort of takes advantage of the medium to deliver sports. That is to say, use data. Al had grown up as a sailor, and watching sailing is like makes watching golf look fucking great, right? Because you don't have any context. But his thought was, if you could bring data to bear around the boat and the weather and the this and the that, you could, and then anyway, that was the beginning. They were the first company to put the internet, put the Olympics on the internet.
Right. And again,
and
it's
if you
hard
look
for,
at surfline.com, and if you look at
Mhm.
any of the stuff, ESPN, you look at all that stuff, Quokka foreshadowed all that digital sports experience shit.
Yeah. And it's hard for people to understand how revolutionary it was at one time to be able to get a live score or, even like pitch by pitch, like, again, information, just the ability not to know something.
Hard to believe today, right? But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. The other one that might be fun, have you done much around Flash and Macromedia?
Okay, so this is a criticism I get all the time, is that I haven't done a lot of technology like that, like say Flash or Ajax or things like that. Like that, as someone that has done web companies, I know were hugely important. Um, Java. I mean, for Christ's sake, how could you talk about the history of the internet without Java? I've stayed away from that so far. Okay. Because I was trying to do an entrepreneurial and also a consumer history. I wanted to tell the story of services and companies that people knew. Like, even if there's how many people got their first email address from Excite? So Excite, in the grand scheme of things, was not the greatest. Anyway, long story
Yeah,
short.
no, I get it. You wanted to hit of course, this is a giant project if you really want to do.
But guess
I
what?
don't know that you can ever do the whole thing.
But now I'm sort of freed up, and now I can go down these little alleys and avenues. So yes, I mean, I've been pitched early Java people, and I have declined so far until I can do it the right way. So yeah, things like Flash, and that's funny, you're almost going to convince me right now, because since Flash is sunsetting, like now's the
Now's
right
the time. The other
yeah.
cool thing about Macromedia, they get no fucking credit for, is they were founded as a CD-ROM company,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well,
and
and
they, in the
I've said,
parlance of our times, they pivoted
yeah,
to the internet, right? And so they did an amazing job. And there's a hell of a story to be told about when Steve Jobs declares war on
yeah,
Flash and
right.
why, right? And
So
the
there you
fight
go. You know what?
between.
Okay, that is a legitimate. You know what? All right. So that's a legitimate episode right there, because I can tell the story of the development of Flash. I can say why it was important. I mean, for Christ's sake, I can, as late as 2003, 2004, people were saying, "Oh, listen, eventually video on the web is going to be huge." It never was. It never was. It never was. We can thank Flash for that, right? That eventually it happened.
Well,
And we
and
can,
here's the big thing they don't get credit for. YouTube never exists without Flash.
exactly.
Because the minute they do a video server, a video server, that is to say, you don't need a player on the client,
Mm-hmm.
everything fucking changes. The fact is, you can go
Exactly.
to a website, click play, and video goes down, and you don't
Right.
remember when there were all those fucking players, the real
Right. Real
networks, and
networks. Yeah.
there was a felt like 1,000 other ones, right?
Yeah.
The Flash on the server, if I'm not mistaken, made that go away, and that's what built fucking YouTube in the
Yeah.
beginning.
Right. But I remember this clear as day, is that all of a sudden there were just there was no videos anywhere, or if tiny postage stamp size, and then you'd play it in your real player, and then all of a sudden I'd go to a blog and there'd be a video playing on it. I'm like, how did that blog get that video? It's the embeddability. Like, that's the YouTube secret, is the
Yes,
fact that you
yes.
could add video. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a fun, if you call that a rabbit hole, but
No,
that's a
no,
fun
no,
one, and
no.
there's a lot
That's
of
called.
lessons to be learned there. By the way, just as a side note, I don't know if he'd do it or not. I have no idea whether he wants to talk to anybody about stuff like this. But if you could get Rob Burgess on,
Mm,
who was the CEO of Macromedia for those
mhm.
battles, he is one of the most colorful guys you could ever imagine.
Listen, I have so many lists of people to track down, and then I'll tell
Well,
you,
I
there's
could
two.
help you track him down if you're interested. You let me know.
I'm super interested. Yes, one of the things that has happened, um, to sort of wrap this up here, when I started this, it was something that I thought was, like we said, just was a hobby. But the fact that we're approaching 70,000 subscribers now and things like that, it, it was it was much harder to get people to come on the show in the early days. And the fact that now I get tracked down, like, the Netflix guy was a perfect example. I've been told by people, off air, like, I'm pissed at you. How come you're only now getting to me? So it's gratifying. It's gratifying to me that it is becoming something that is sort of like, respected as like a badge of honor. Like, not for my own ego, but for the fact that people are recognizing I'm trying to do history the right way. And so that would be my goal, is that this book, the podcast, the project in general, is if I would track down, early on I would never track down a guy like that. Now I would, because all you got to do is look at at people that have been on the show and what I'm trying to do, and I think it looks legit to people. So
and the other thing, let me just nudge you a little bit on this. You said you're doing history right, and I think I understand what you mean. But, and I think it's a really fucking important but, and I'll just talk to you like a fan for a second.
Okay.
I think what you're doing is you're capturing history in a totally new way. And I'll tell you exactly what I mean. I fucking hate podcasts that are radio shows on the internet.
Yeah.
And the reason I don't like them is because I go, you guys don't fucking get the medium. Podcasting allows us to do things. There's no reason to have a 3-minute segment with somebody awesome. That's just fucking retardation right there.
Yeah, yeah.
And even like a TV show I like, I don't want to pick on anybody because I don't mean to be not nasty to anybody, but you pick a TV interview show that you like. Well, the reality is the guest is on for a very short period of time. And if it's an important topic, anyway. So my point is, in the early days of any new medium, we take the old paradigm and stick it on the new paradigm, and then hopefully a new one emerges. And I think there are podcasters that use the medium. And so when I think about what you've done, Brian, you have used technology in a thoughtful way and in a very inclusive way to collaborate in a, and this is all going to sound fucking corny, I know, but you're doing essentially technology-enabled, community-based history capture. I don't know. Those may or may not be the right words, but you're not just writing the fucking history the way a historian in 1970 would, right? You're using what's at your disposal, and there's this inclusion where people around you are part of this Brian project, right? And so that's what's really fucking cool. So if you want to call that doing history right, absolutely. But I think you're doing it in a very interesting new way that's a paradigm for how people can really do current history, if I can call it that.
Yeah, and I like I said, I'm thinking of a Medium post or something. I would encourage other people. It doesn't have to be history; it can be whatever. But whatever your next project is, do it out loud and do it in the open. Because 10 years ago we used to call it crowdsourcing, things like that. But whatever. I think that your term, I like it, that you're using the tools at your disposal. And so why, if you have a new idea that you're working on, why be a tinkerer alone in your lab, in your basement or whatever? Open up your window and see if anyone else wants to help.
Maybe there's some other people who care about, underwater boat making in Botswana or whatever the fuck it is you care about.
Well, but thank you for the kind words about the project. But my definition of doing history right is just being factual and accurate. I'm trying my best to get as close to the truth as possible, but thank you.
I think it's great. And I think the other thing I love about it, and then I'll shut up, is as you may know, we're at the lowest point in recorded American history for entrepreneurship. And the Wall Street Journal a little over a year ago declared a crisis in American entrepreneurship. And so for me personally, I'm someone for whom entrepreneurship was not a way up. It was a way out. And in the United States, I wouldn't even have a high school diploma. And so it crushes me. It breaks my heart to think that entrepreneurship is in such decline. And so I have a huge commitment to try to make a difference there. And what I love about what you're doing is, you've created something that people 200 and 500 and God knows how many years into the future will enjoy and appreciate. And in the current time, I also think you're bringing forward so many lessons that can be so illustrative for entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, investment bankers, the whole ecosystem around trying to enable this dream that we have to, in my case, come to America and participate in this industry and make some awesome shit happen, have a good time, and hopefully, deliver a lot of value as a result. And so I think it's that record that you're trying to represent, those thematic things that you're teasing out, those learnings that come as a result of understanding these things, that shit's fucking important.
Yeah, and I'll leave it at this. I think that it's valuable to do that because how many times have I referenced him? Everybody has Mark Andreessen on their podcast and their interview shows or whatever, and they ask him, "Well, what's the future? What's coming next?" and whatever. Okay, even that guy is only going to be right 10% of the time. I actually think that you can get closer to being right 20 or 30% of the time if you look at the lessons. Instead of trying to guess what the future is, look at the patterns, look at the history, and try to see what has failed before and figure out why it failed, or what succeeded before and why it succeeded. So if what you want to do is be successful, you can go to the oracles and the prognosticators and hope that you get their 10% of being right, or you can try to go back and learn the lessons and get closer to that 20 or 30% of being right. So technology is a horrible industry for preserving its own history. It's always about the next gadget, the next version of the software or whatever. But man, just stop, look around, and if you're going to start a company, try to look at the lessons of other people that either failed at doing it before or succeeded at doing it before.
The other one for me about that is we're lucky to live and work in this industry, and I can remember being in downtown San Francisco in 1998 and looking around and going to the rooftop parties at the industry standard that were jam-packed and all of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I of course didn't know it was going to end so quickly, but we knew it was a bubble and we knew we were witnessing history. And there are moments where you go, hey, fuck, take a second and soak this in, because like something's happening here.
This is a book on the history of industry standards, starving to death on $200 million.
Oh, wow.
Within 6 months of having the biggest, the single magazine issue with the most ad pages in it in the history of the world, within 6 months they were bankrupt. That was the dot-com bubble.
Amazing. Yeah, I remember when they beat Vogue magazine for ads, the whole industry was like, and actually here, I didn't know that it was going to be over so fast here, but here's how I knew for sure we were in trouble. The industry standard ran an issue, I want to say it was 2000, but I don't know for sure. And on the cover of it were these two fucking shrinks, Brian.
Yeah.
And they had started a practice somewhere in Silicon Valley. I want to say Palo Alto, but anyway, wherever the fuck it was, that was focused on dealing with sudden wealth syndrome. This is apparently the affliction you get when you make a lot of money in Silicon Valley, sudden wealth syndrome. And I thought, holy fuck, the world is all fucking upside down and backwards.
Well, I've had Jason Calacanis on the show. The last issue of his .com era magazine, they had the Hindenburg on the cover going down in flames or whatever. So I always give him credit for that, for like calling the top and the bubble bursting and whatever. So
wow. Anything else, Brian, before we wrap?
No, but listen, this is my favorite type of show to do, where you just kick things around, Chris. Like it's just maybe this is what I want to evolve to more, is like, as opposed to interviewing, just like commiserating. But this has been fantastic, and I appreciate you letting me do this.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you coming on. As you can tell, I'm a fan. And, to just put a fine point on your comment, what I discovered about podcasting was podcasters make and I don't mean this pejoratively, because I think it's just the way things are. They make an unconscious decision that, well, of course we're going to be an interview show. And therefore I'm going to be like, pick your favorite interviewer, whether it's Terry Gross or whoever it is, right? And we made a decision when we started Legends and Losers. We weren't going to do that. That we wanted to be, and the counter word we had to it was a dialogue show, where it's it's two guys over beers.
Yeah.
And we can chase rabbits down zebra holes. and I also believe, actually, this may be a good question to wrap on. You know, in this Kardashian 140 character world, we had a guest on, Eric Weinmeier, and he was the first blind guy to summit Everest and the first, and I believe only blind guy to ever solo kayak the Grand Canyon. He's unbelievable.
Wow. Yeah.
And at one point I asked him about his own fame, and he immediately deflected the question and started talking about his charity and some of the amazing things they do, which was very cool. And then he sort of circled back to it and he said, look, yeah, I know I got to do some promotion and I got to go speak and I got to sell my books and all that stuff, but it's for a reason. We're trying to do all this stuff with his No Boundaries Foundation and this and that. And he says, but here's what I know for sure. The world doesn't need more bullshit. And so I guess my point is, you know, a lot of podcasts are very polished and, you know, the 3 quick tips for losing weight. And like, it's just all this, it's like a Twitter fucking thing, right? It's
quick fix. Yeah.
It's not real people sitting down over a beer or coffee, having an authentic dialogue, I guess is my point. And so we wanted to create a show that was the show we wanted to hear.
Just like I wanted to write the book that I wanted to read. Yeah.
That you wanted to read. Well, and now the cool thing is you're an accidental podcaster who has this fucking amazing living time capsule that's more than just a companion to a book. I mean, it's very vibrant.
Accidental podcaster, accidental historian, accidental book author. Shit, I was an accidental entrepreneur. Listen, if there's one thing I can leave you with, the only thing I know is maybe the best thing that can ever happen to you is not to know what you shouldn't be able to do. Just do it and find out much later, oh, I shouldn't have been able to do that.
All right. And on that note, Brian, thank you so much. You're fucking awesome. And can't wait till the book comes out.
All right. Thank you, sir. Please check out the Internet History Podcast. And thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Be legendary, my friend. Is there someone in your life who would love this episode with Brian? If so, why not share it with them right now? I would ask you to be a podcast legend. And most people in the world have not enjoyed a podcast recently. And so I would ask you to introduce 2 people you love to 2 podcasts you love, help them get it set up on their smartphone, get them subscribed, and get them into the podcast world. Also want to remind you, One Life Fully Lived, we are doing our big West Coast event, October 21st and October 22nd, onelifefullylived.org. Dream, plan, and live your best life. Come out and see us in Sacramento. Would also like to ask you to go to legendsandlosers.com and subscribe to our mail list, and that way you'll get all of our shows and anything else we are up to. We would like to thank HarperCollins Instant Classic, Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. Equity Directory, connecting startups to the talent and resources they need to build a legendary business. Our friends at NetSuite, #1 in cloud ERP. Send email to blackhole@legendsandlosers.com and we'll get you tickets to the NetSuite Next Ready Business Tour. Spiro, the sales app for salespeople who like to make money. Verve Coffee, leaders in California artisan coffee, the official coffee of Legends and Losers, and Verve is always available at vervecoffee.com. Rapid Media, legendary marketing outcomes in Australia at rapidmedia.com.au. Producing results, the producers of legendary podcasts, and this one too. My good friends at Interview Valet, podcast interview marketing. If you're a thought leader, get your leading thoughts on podcasts at interviewvalet.com. The extraordinary bestseller, No Barriers, A Blind Man's Journey to Kayak the Grand Canyon by our friend and guest on episode 47, the most legendary Eric Weinmeier. Bell Destination Events. Hey, want to get married? Want to get married in Hawaii? Make it a Bell Destination event at belldestinationevents.com. Super Consumers, the legendary book by our good friend, guest, HBR contributor, and many other things, Eddie Yoon, Super Consumers at eddiewoodgrow.com. .net. Riding the Pine, a podcast that I've gotten very much into. I'm stoked to be a guest on with our friend Jamie J. Check out Riding the Pine and Doctors Without Borders. You make a donation and we make a difference in the worst places on planet Earth. Got to remind you, this oddcast is a sole property of the Legends and Losers Oddcast Network, and we would love it if you shared the shit out of it. Today's information is provided to you solely for inflammation. Today's information is provided to you solely for informational purposes. In the event of a water landing, Legends and Losers can be an awesome flotation device, particularly if the inflammation is working for you. This oddcast was produced in a studio that does contain nuts, clearly. And we need to tell you, Legends and Losers is never tested on GMOs. The left lane is the passing lane, not a cruising lane. Get out of the left lane and let us pass. Listen to Lincoln Park. Chris Cornell was right. Support your local internet historian. Always only fart in an elevator of 3 or more people. Always shower with a friend. And thank you, Candy Dandy. We love you. And hey, Colin, this oddcast really ties the room together, doesn't it? Our deepest apologies today go to Greg Clark, Chief Executive Officer of Symantec. Sorry, Greg. We just ran out of time for you. That's it, my legendary friends. We'll see you again soon, I sure hope, on another episode of Legends and Losers.